Hi, this is Dr. Justyna Agnieszka Chevalier. This video will be about prescription drugs denominated as psychotropic. The drugs first I will divide into groups. Drugs that are called psychotropic are divided into major, minor anxiolytics and also as the drugs used for anesthesia. Drugs also are divided then into antidepressants, and antidepressants are divided into selective and non-selective ones. And then those non-selective ones are divided into those that act on certain clusters of neurotransmitters, such as tricyclics, which act on three: dopamine, serotonin, and noradrenaline. And that's it. And for instance, on two, such as dopamine and serotonin. And those that are selective then are divided into, depending on the particle they act on, based on a given particle. So it can be those that act on serotonin and then on which part of the circuit they act. All of those drugs follow the same rules as street drugs. And so we need to understand that those drugs, while we do not address aspect of the cause effect in the ecosystem of a given mental state, provide no cure but kill, and chronic condition is only a condition in which that person actually is being dismissed as source of information. Other persons are given more importance, and the person is administered the drugs to actually lie assigning to pathologizing what is a natural state in the ecosystem, to non-pursue or dismiss, or to assign it to the drug as an action. And so an example of that, there are various examples of that, but the example of that, for instance, is administrations of antidepressants for failed preferred sexual relationships, lifelong ones. So marrying a person to a second best or less sexually person based on loving kindness, to have that person then receive the drug that mimics state of being in love, and blame that state then on the drug when it is that person actually feels laconic or unable to participate, or when that person is rejected to have children, or rejects such, usually, which causes also the appreciation called depression in the other person, to administer such, as opposed to settling that relationship where that maximum is, and disgust or rejection of that love occurs, and pursuit of persons based on the natural instinct in love, where that drug is not needed and is offensive, as blamed as changes occurring caused by presence of that person interested and loving that other person. Those drugs are also given for premenstrual syndromes, and also for a lack of interest in activities when there's no life threat and the activity or work is promoted instead of pursuit of family life or sex life in adulthood based on basic sexual drive for two. And that is caused chronic depression, and for that we also give a synthetic pill to mimic being with the person that is loved. Now, the second group of drugs, those antipsychotics, are administered for in following situations: when the person mistakes to the identity being hurt in the past, person who committed a crime, did bodily injury, or tried to kill, and the others pose the same risk because of lack of exposure, to mitigate fear of exposure, or to mitigate also the association of with that person of persons who are not at fault not being that person. And so it can go either way. It can be peaceful, or it can be leading to crime and abuse, having that same characteristic. That is cured by life exposure and making adaptation mechanism. Now, the second condition in which antipsychotics are administered are when relationships, sexual ones, are unwanted, and that is being in love with someone else is considered psychosis or being sick, and that can be with ideation of wanting to die, having to pursue or being pursued sexually in a relationship that is unwanted to benefit social structures or work, as you can see, it kills, and it's not a cure either, not a chronic illness, but failure to actually properly diagnose and in truth make proper adjustments. And second one is with homicidal or suicidal ideation, when that person actually has someone else, is in love with someone else, and that drug, that love, is supposed to lower the amount of response of being in love with someone else, to enable work or relationship with person that is, because of the presence of the other one, disgusted upon or hated as potential parent for children when pursuing sexuality or sexual acts. And so that is also administered then in pregnancies to sustain that pregnancy despite an urge to remove bodily excretions and source of that distress because somebody else is loved, as well as is in so-called dysphoric premenstrual syndrome administered to women to reduce the risk of harming the person who pursues sexually, or harming a person who does not, being loved, pursue sexually to have a child. Next is to administer that also to men who feel as failure because of being loved and are forced out, because sex is stigmatized, of pursuing own offspring, while the person who is attached to that one is supposed to be of greater esteem and the same as the other one because of external circumstances such as work, or because of need for representation or to please family. The anxiety medication is administered when pursuit of a given activity is associated with fear of failure, which may result in rejection, primal rejection by the person who actually wants to have children with that person, and it is because of association of work as curriculum or applying for sexual marriage or sexual relationship. Second condition, that's stage fright. Second condition that it is applied to is when person fears being pursued sexually because of not sharing, not being source of sexual arousal by a person who treats self as if in a vacuum and looks for anyone or any somebody else, and there's another person whose rage is feared, the same as hatred of that person in hateful relationships. So those are, as you can see, all adjusted by proper constellation of relationships in proper timing. And orientation to the person means also having the right person that causes, as cause effect, changes of in preparation to have children in sex and marriage and in love, and also proper constellation of persons who always have also somebody else and there's no one hurt, because if that person is rejected, that person is not source in self who is rejecting in the other person of those changes, and the others external sources insist on that, causing distress. That is another crazy, another need to prevent suicide or isolation, to administer antipsychotics, antidepressants, or many other calming drugs to not fight back social pressure to mate, or fight back being pushed at, for instance, somebody who is unwanted, unloved, or being fight back being pushed apart from a wanted relationship, or in condescension, deprived of work, of means, pending a relationship that is not wanted de facto because of social pressures and forcefulness of such. And so these things need to be remembered, and action of these drugs, for example, considered as a short-term remediation to resolve that situation, and chronicity, if someone loves someone all life, is created by stubborn insistence that those drugs and that situation does not cause changes in body that result in changes in brain and tissues, such as obesity, such as tardive dyskinesia, such as changes in neurotransmitters, augmentation of ventricles in the brain, such as drooliness and other tics, for instance, that are not part of that dyskinetic syndrome, inability to work, diabetes, and many other things that are caused by non-resolution of situation by proper alignment of constellation, not address medical and physical changes in medicine as cause effect with epidemiologic diagnosis, and not also having these drugs as secondary as opposed to the cause effect caused by relationships and social pressures that can be addressed and solved, not also only by social workers, by persons themselves and by others. So be mindful who and how you prescribe drugs and who you do damage assigning labels of sick or being dependent on drugs, preventing that person from a marriage, preventing others from life-saving maneuvers and saving others by creating an impression of not being reliable at work or as a sexual partner and parent, and be mindful of who you actually give these drugs against will to create disease and kill, preventing normal functioning by stigmatization, similar to formation of criminal that I am just now describing in my book Predators Want to Love Not Kill in Nature, which is especially meant for persons who are high achievers and who are victims of positive characteristics profiling. So the more the person is outstanding in bell curve, the more there is a surge of imperfections, badness, and incapacity, to label and denominate that as being self good enough for that person because self feels inadequate for that person as sexual partner or work partner, and that person starts to be forced socially by rewarding system to declare being sick or being dangerous, and is then isolated for life, treated worse than wolves or dogs. And that is to change, and that is to be implemented first if that is what is necessary as underground press, and then as conscious program of resocialization and deinstitutionalization in the United States and also abroad. Thank you. This is the last video, the Hexa method and the description of how to match persons properly. That is part of my system in conjunction with teams also of medical experts will be described in another video series, because that one is something else. Remember that there are 3 components that need to be corresponding in Hexa method in intensity when evaluating couple. First one is selfless love. So altruism is person pre-meeting loved as most adored during lifestyle, and does that person rejoice in it and feels the exact same way about the other one, the partner. Second one, that's pre-existing love, so that there is no obstacle in love making and forming a relationship. Second question is selfish love. Is that person ready, based on instinct, waive all of life activities and achievements for sexual activity and being with that preferred person in act of utmost selfishness, because this is preferred over all else? Is that rejoiced by the other person, and does that person is ready and wanting as most and best outcome to do the same for that one? So that reciprocity, so that's 2, 4. And third one is enchantment, meaning is the individual physical and mental state as is source of sexual arousal and pursuit of such looking children in maximum lifelong sexual pleasure derived from these characteristics, often regardless of how that person tries to pursue sexually or stimulate. And is that reciprocal? Is that other person deriving the most intense sexual arousal and orgasm because of individual unique physical and mental characteristics contrasted with reality that results in a lasting non-obstacle sexual relationship called attachment, children, and work as needed for the society because of persons who enable such. So that's Hexa method 6 in relation 1 and 1.